Hey guys, welcome to Zabbix Spotlight, and today with me I have Ingus Vilins, technical solution expert from Riga, Latvia, and also a Zabbix fan. And Ingus is going to tell us a bit about his experience with Zabbix, maybe share some use cases here and there. Without further ado, Ingus, can you please tell us a bit about yourself?
Okay, thank you for having me here today. My name is Ingus Vilins and I'm an IT solution expert, currently working at a bank. And my history, I have a long history with Zabbix, so back since 2014. And that's when Zabbix 2.0 was still supported. And yeah, like 3.0 seemed to be such an advancement, and well, now here we are.
6.0 right now.
Yes, indeed.
All right, so like you said, you've been a long time Zabbix user since 2 point something, and you have a lot of experience with Zabbix. You still use it today, right?
That's right, every day.
Every day. Okay, and what I wanted to focus in this discussion today, so usually in our Spotlight videos we focus on different topics depending on the expertise of the person that I'm interviewing. With you today we wanted to focus on alerting and all things related to alerting, integrations maybe a bit, maybe triggers when we talk about those, and other things. So let's start and talk about alerts. So with alerts, from my experience, what I've seen when people use Zabbix or maybe even some other monitoring solutions, oftentimes we are in situations when people have alert storms. When you start your day, you open your email and you have hundreds of alerts from Zabbix, right? And over time, people just start ignoring them. Just, okay, another 100 alerts from Zabbix, whatever, ignore, and things get lost there. So how, in your experience, what would be the best way to configure alerting? How to avoid these alert storms? How to, on the other hand, not miss out on important things? Can you share your experience with that?
Yeah, this is a very important thing to configure, and that's a path that you have to follow to build your monitoring. And I like your example of the alert storms, and it leads to a symptom called alert fatigue, where you have so many alerts coming that you no longer react to them. And I can give you also another bad example here is that a team, well, they used to receive an email for each warning and error that they have. And typically they receive like 1,000 emails on the mailbox per day. So, but then how they detect that they're having an incident is, well, okay, now today we got 11,000 emails, so that's probably when our systems are failing. But I don't think that is the best way how to do it. So, and then another philosophy which you can think is that, so we'll compare this to your body. How when your body tells you that you're not feeling well, do you react on these early warnings? Or do you wait till the moment it fails completely and then you call down 911 for the emergency services to pick you up? And same with Zabbix triggers. So Zabbix provides excellent capabilities of customizing the trigger thresholds and give you early warnings, and then and alert you also at the very last moment. And then it's which way you choose. And of course, you don't want your triggers to be too sensitive, and you want them to alert exactly when there is a problem which requires attention. Because if you receive 11,000 emails a day, that is probably not something that you're going to be reacting on.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, poor email server, right? 11,000 emails per day, that's oof. And then you forward all of that to recycle bin, and you just, okay, I'm going to ignore all of that. But I think you'd agree with me that, well, we can always tell, okay, your trigger thresholds, they don't have to be too sensitive, but they don't have to be too insensitive on the other hand. You know, you still have to catch the problem. And how do you think maybe that can take some time to figure out? Like, what is the perfect, ideal sort of threshold or logic there? Because I think it's not like, okay, this is my first day using Zabbix in a new company, maybe. I'm going to set up everything perfectly. I think it takes time, don't you agree?
It takes time. Again, it's a process. And typically, when you start with monitoring something, particularly if you do not know the nature of the system, the behavior, what it does over time, it's I think the best to first of all, well, set up the items, do the data collection for a few days, a week maybe, to spot the weekly patterns, and then configure triggers. Of course, you can configure triggers already immediately, but probably you will want to adjust the thresholds, because it's also very interesting to observe the system behavior throughout the day. Because during the working time, you look at the system characteristics and you see the, well, real-time numbers. But then it's actually very surprising what happens with the system when you're not looking at it. And then at night time you spot, oh, but there's a scheduled backup every Saturday going on. And then what the system spikes. But that's probably something that you do not want to be alerted upon, because it's, well, a regular activity. And then all these cases, you either configure proper time intervals that, okay, let's alert on this problem only during daytime. Well, let's say working hours, or well, Zabbix provides loads of capabilities to control
maintenance also, right?
Maintenance is another great way to do it, including tag-based maintenance, which is an amazing feature because, well, real use case. So, well, database servers, they have the database things monitored, but then precisely there's a backup, which spikes the CPU and maybe RAM at night time. And the database admins, they do not want to see the CPU because, well, yes, it's normal for it to be at 100%. Yet they want the database triggers to be notified upon also at night time. Yeah, so that's what trigger tag based maintenance is very, very handy.
Yeah, definitely a great feature. Not many people, I think, use it. It can, well, with tagging, it maybe can get complex, but if you have designed your tags properly and sort of went into Zabbix with that mindset that, okay, I'm going to use tags for maintenance, for actions, for other things, then I think that can be a real lifesaver and can help you, like you said, reduce alert fatigue and actually receive the alerts that you want. Speaking of alert fatigue, and you can agree here or disagree, that's why we're here, to give your opinion. But I think also the method, the system where you receive your alerts, so emails, phone calls, messengers, tickets maybe, so ITSM systems, that also matters. And what sort of integrations, what sort of systems, messaging systems have you worked with? And maybe you can talk about how alert fatigue also comes into play here, because one thing is emails, right? Okay, I'm getting, like you said, 11,000 emails a day. I can safely ignore that or forward it to recycle bin. What if I'm getting a phone call every 30 minutes? That's a whole other deal, right? I probably have my phone at least on vibrate, and I'm gonna feel physically those phone alerts, or Jira tickets, like a list of or any other system, a list of tickets that are maybe pending or waiting for a response and actually have to respond to them. So how does that come into play in your experience? Do you maybe have some sort of system of escalations, first emails, then phone calls, then something else? Or you have implemented these or had experience with these?
Yeah, so I have been working with quite a lot of integrations and alerting scenarios. Also, I do have my own personal preferences. As since I am responsible for my Zabbix environment, I really care for it. So for every problem that I have in my Zabbix, the Zabbix infrastructure, the Zabbix server, database server, etc., I receive an email. That's completely fine. But I have configured my severities that I rely on the old good SMS text messages. but I receive them only when it really requires my immediate attention. I have to log on whatever time it is, because not reacting to this SMS message will cause Zabbix downtime probably. Having proper severities set is very crucial. Then, well, depending on the workflow, you might want to indeed receive Jira tickets, for example, or any other ticketing system, and that's right. So, for that purpose, we do have an action. You can configure that with a delay of 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and not create the tickets immediately. And what benefit will that give you is that you often have this thing called trigger flapping when a problem appears for a very short time, like again a typical CPU spikes for a few minutes. It raises a trigger, but that does not necessarily mean that you will need a Jira for that, because after a few minutes the spike drops and the trigger goes to resolved state. So therefore we want the tickets to be created only for problems that persist for, well, say, okay, at least 3 or 5 minutes, not the very short ones. There are other teams which prefer chat messages, yeah, in the MS Teams channel or Slack or messaging system of their preference. And yes, also integrations with phone call systems can be very, very useful. Here also, when we speak about integration, Zabbix API is a great help. For instance, well, Jira ticket creation with help of Zabbix API. There is a built-in already Zabbix functionality with this.
A webhook, yeah.
Yes, we however did this already, well, for my current instance, before the webhooks were available, with help of Bash script, and which utilizes Zabbix API. And also one very nice thing, what it does, it returns the Jira number in the acknowledgement message. And that is very, very, very useful if you look into Zabbix and you see, well, has Jira been created, then what the Jira number is. That's very handy.
Yeah, those definitely can be helpful. API, webhooks, now you have tons of ways of achieving what needs to be achieved and provide information or one-way and two-way integrations. Before this here meeting, we talked about trigger names a bit. And this is something, so when we were sort of discussing questions for the Spotlight episode, and this is something that you said you want to talk about, and I didn't even think about it, but yeah, can you tell us a bit how trigger names, how proper trigger naming can affect the efficiency of the messages or alerts that you receive in whatever system? Can proper naming help us figure out what's wrong faster and react more effectively?
Item and trigger naming is a very efficient way how to structurize your data first of all. Of course, it's not such a big issue if you are alone working with your own Zabbix. Then it doesn't matter how you name things. But in typical corporate environments, there are way more users working with this, like, well, 10, 20, hundreds of users connected to the same Zabbix. And then naming becomes very, very crucial, because if you name your problem like server log error, it's a trigger name, and then you get like hundreds of these, and then these problem names appear in the same list of event stream and is displayed in the problem pages. And if the same Zabbix environment is used by many users, then it can raise questions, because not always filtering will help. It helps, of course, but not always. Mostly in larger environments, you will not have all the triggers with proper tags or with proper names, but then it is really important to understand when this name is significant to resolving an incident. Because when incidents happen, you probably will have dedicated incident handlers that start looking at the event stream. You probably will have managers looking, and they will want to see a clear picture, to see the root cause. What was the first problem that appeared? And then naming is very important. So how to structure the names? My preference is that, well, it all starts with the data collection. So it's item names first, because there will be no triggers, no problems without the items. So the items, well, I prefer first to have, let's say, if it's a component like CPU or memory or disk or something, or ping, have this in the beginning of the line.
Mm-hmm.
Then pick your delimiter of choice. I use dash, others might use colon, and so on. Yeah. So that separates. First of all, that categorizes the items. And where is this benefit? So first of all, it appears very nicely in latest data pages, in other pages. Yeah, when you can sort by name. Yeah, that already brings clarity. Then you can use it very nicely in filtering. And then, for instance, so you have the CPU, and then you have the load, all three values, the utilization, and of course it's great if you know what the difference between load and utilization is. And then you for each CPU time, then you have so you have the time name, and then you have the used percentage, for example. Yeah, for disks, so you have the the disk, the what it is, the file system name, and so well you have the total space, free, used percentage, and make sure you have these names that are nicely sortable, so you can use it in all kinds of filters. And when that is done, also it shows up very nicely also on the dashboards, on the graphs. You have them aligned nicely. Also in the graph widgets, so you can wildcard then the flexible parts, and then you have the static parts. So the CPU star used, and you will have all your CPU times listed nicely. Mm-hmm. And then the same applies to the triggers, to the trigger names. Yeah, again, so include the system that you have, whether that's a component or a service, or let's say a database. So the database name, users connected over some time period on host.name.
Mm-hmm. And then at the end, all of that can be used, can be passed by using macros to your alerts, and then you see all that information nicely structured and everything's clear. And I think this is somewhat related to my personal experience. In smaller teams, having unstructured data is fine, because if all of your IT team is sitting in a single room, 5 guys for example, everyone can always ask everyone else, hey, what's this or what's that? But as you grow and you have multiple departments, this is where what you're saying starts playing a huge role, because everyone needs to understand, well, not everyone, but most people have their own sort of thing that they are interested in, and they need to understand what it is without poking the Zabbix admin constantly. Yeah, so that's extremely important. And you mentioned dashboards. So another, I think, part of, well, it sort of comes in maybe after alerting or before alerting, depends on how you have configured things. But dashboards and visualizations, right? Your NOC teams, your support engineers, whatever you have. If you're a small company, then probably even your senior or regular infrastructure designers and engineers will look at Zabbix dashboards, and they'll try to maybe see a trend in their data, or just detect spikes and point at them and try to figure out, hey, what's going on here? And nowadays, yeah, we can have permissions to dashboards. We can have slides based on dashboards. We have roles where you can restrict who has access to what. Some users may only have access to dashboards and that's it. I'm thinking NOC teams over here. So how would you structure your dashboards and your general visualization to sort of help out with figuring the trend, the data? And this maybe, like I said, comes into play before you define those triggers during that data analysis point of view. What do you use? Do you have dashboards that maybe have only graphs? Do you use item value widgets? Do you try and figure out by using top hosts what's going on with the data? And maybe some general advice for structuring dashboards.
Dashboards are amazing and they really greatly help with, well, understanding your systems and also in solving the incidents. And there are so many widgets, particularly in the newest versions of Zabbix, that are really awesome. Starting, of course, well, the classic ones like the graphs, yeah? So that tells how the data is changing in time, and you can select all these time intervals and in the filter. That helps a lot. Zoom out. When you're looking at the graphs, it's well, typically you have the default settings so that look at the last 1 hour, and that's okay-ish. But zoom out. Look at how your data behaves throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the months, and well, all the years. And you'll be probably surprised even how this looks, and it really differs from the instantaneous values. When speaking about dashboards, of course, there is not enough space to put all the metrics that you have in one view, so you have to pick the most important ones. So make sure that you understand your systems, what they do, and what are the key metrics which really indicate the performance the best. Then you can use top hosts widget, which is with the new bars and with the thresholds. That really is amazing feature. I really like that one. Also the latest value, single latest value one is great, and you can customize it so heavily. Yeah, you can just display the value. You can display the up down arrows in different colors, and that's really great. Of course, well, the old good problem widget, but in different ways. So you can just show the list of problems. You can show the history of problems by different tag filtering. Just when you do, it might have performance implications. But, well, be careful with that when you do. But another, I think, very underrated one is problems by host groups, by severities widget. And it very nicely shows you all the groups that are having problems and what severity, how many severity problems you have in them. And then you mouse over and see what exact problems are. You can clearly identify the areas in which you are having problems. In like which part of it, is it the networking part, or is it the database servers, or whatnot? Another very nice thing which I really like about the new Zabbix is that you can have, how is it called, tabs or pages of the dashboards, and not only dashboards but latest data. And problems views can also have them, and that is really great. You can save as many as you want, and yeah, that is a great help as well.
One last thing, once again, that we briefly talked about before this. Yeah, full disclosure, we do discuss these topics beforehand. Otherwise, hey, everyone has their preferences that they want to talk about. And we talked about security in particular. For example, when it comes to dashboards and even maps and other things, latest data, you need to have different levels of permissions and sometimes even roles, so users have access either to particular sections, particular host groups. Sometimes they need to have only read permissions. Sometimes they need to have read-write permissions restricted to particular host groups. Hey, everyone can be a super admin. I mean, like I said, if you're running a small company, maybe, probably, sure, I've seen that happen, but in a large shop, that's not going to work, right? So can you talk about how you structure what would you recommend for structuring permission logic, how in your experience that has been structured, and do you have experience with user roles, utilizing those to maybe limit, let's say for a NOC team, access only to dashboards, and that's it. So yeah, please share your experience with permissions and roles.
Yeah, permissions and roles, again, that's a very, very powerful feature of Zabbix, and I really like it. And how to structure your users. So I currently do have a multi-user environment with, well, really hundreds of user accounts, but well, on average 40 to 80 users connected daily. And that, of course, requires some roles, and some users, well, they have different needs. As far as the Zabbix super admin accounts are concerned, that really belongs to very few people. The ones which really maintain Zabbix, the ones which will actually go into the big black SSH window and do command line stuff there.
Scary.
So that's scary, yeah, but that's a great responsibility to have, and that only few people will be granted. Then, for the most part, for all the newly created users, which by the way is automated, can be automated in a large portion, so everybody gets a user permission. And then, of course, depending on your type of organization, you can decide whether you give. So a user can read and see all the host groups and all the data that is collected. But you might want to restrict them, of course, and Zabbix gives you great capabilities of doing so. If you're, let's say, a service provider, then you want to separate your customers, and that's super critical, yeah. And for some users which are more advanced and they want to do configuration stuff, so of course you grant Zabbix admin permissions, which enables you access to the configuration menu. Mm-hmm. But then, well, depending on a type of admin, so for example, you have database admins which only want and will have access to only their database servers, and for all the other areas as well. So networking guys, so they will add their routers and switches there, but they do not want and they do not need to see the applications, for example. They can only, well, view the latest data. Another interesting use case is that when you want to grant a user, well, you have a user which and the user has no interest in configuration menu, but the user wants to acknowledge and has to acknowledge the problems in their workflow, and then it's interesting that you can create a user with the user permissions and put it in a user group with read-write rights, and only that's the way how you can allow the user to do acknowledgement on the problems.
So a read-only sort of user that can also acknowledge problems.
Yes.
So not really just read, but also, yeah, acknowledge it and type in, hey, this is being worked on, go to bed, it's going to be fixed by morning. Okay, that's a really great use case. I don't think that that's something that many of our community members know, so I think that's very nice. And this also ties in what you said, I think. So with dashboards, with configuration sections, everything, you can get fatigued by Zabbix if you have access to everything and you open up a list of dashboards and, oh my God, there are hundreds of dashboards. What should I look at? I'm just going to ignore it. You can also use tags in permissions also. Tags are supported there. User group to host group permissions, roles, things like that. All of that can also alleviate some of that fatigue. When you open up Zabbix, you see only what you need to see. Database admins see databases, application admins see applications, and so on.
And there is one more page which can really contribute to minimizing the fatigue, which we didn't mention before, and that is often missed not known, but there is an old good page in the reports triggers top 100. And have a look at that one, and probably you will be surprised.
Yeah, I completely forgot about this, but you're totally right, because this is something that I've done, and I oftentimes, back when I was working in support, we did for our customers, that when they say, hey, can you take a look at my environment? I just need to have it tuned. Sometimes there's too much alerting, other things. That's one of the first things that I tend to do. I open that triggers top 100. I look at, usually there are a few outliers like top 5 or 10, and I ask the person from the customer side, hey, why are there so many alerts? Do you need to have that many alerts? Does that make sense to you? And they're like, no, those 87 alerts in the past, they don't really make sense to us. So yeah, we should probably look at that. So a really simple thing, right? It's not complex at all and easy to read and understand, but yeah, it can be a lifesaver when it comes to fatigue. And generally all of that data also needs to be stored in the database, all of those events. So performance-wise, that's also helpful. All right. Thank you a lot, Ingus. I think we covered many different use cases and scenarios when it comes to alerting. We discussed a lot of different sort of things to avoid and things to implement for Zabbix best practices. Your experience has been extremely useful, and I hope everyone else also enjoyed it. And you can definitely pick up a thing or two or 3 or 5 from this here interview and try it in your own environment. Thank you, and we will definitely see you around.
Thank you.